I've been building cloud services basically since the cloud began, and before that, what's interesting is Delphix is a on-premise software today. I've never built a piece of on-premise technology in my career, and it's going on a couple decades now. So back when, in the mid-'90s, we started building web products and digital products, that's where I got my start. So those are my roots, my DNA. And so one of the things that I thought was really interesting, most recently, I was at a company called Lookout Mobile Security. I've been here for about 6 months now. And Lookout was collecting mobile telemetry from devices and aggregating and analyzing it, supporting tens of millions of mobile applications or mobile devices. And we had to build up huge amounts of tooling in production so our security researchers could get access to this really sensitive data. Now think about mobile. We've got location, we've got all kinds of configuration data for your device, we've got your list of applications, just amazingly sensitive data. So our security researchers, they did need to access all this data so they could analyze it, but we couldn't just pull it back into our sandbox environments because we're talking about hundreds of terabytes of data. So we invested in building tooling in production. And we had teams dedicated to building tools in production just to enable research, when really the researchers just wanted access to the underlying components because they didn't need custom tooling, it actually got in the way. And so when I saw what Delphix has been doing over the years, it clicked. Like, all right, Lookout was definitely on the cutting edge for doing this kind of stuff. Our data stack was using Hive on S3 with the bulk of our data set. We're using a lot of Elasticsearch. That's where companies are going. But they have this problem. If Lookout was having this problem, I can only imagine what enterprises that are going to be getting there in the upcoming years, they're going to hit this square in the forehead, and it's going to hurt. So I came to Delphix to really help figure out how to move us forward. As these customers are all on the cloud journey, how do they move forward? How do they deal with it? And so most of these companies are in some aspect of this journey. Either they're dabbling, they've got a couple applications, maybe they did a cloud native pilot and they understand what it is, but the bulk of their infrastructure is not on public clouds. They're figuring out, do they need to go hybrid clouds? There's a lot to figure out. And there's a couple different branches that I think are interesting to talk about, and we can look at then, what is Delphix doing about that? So one branch is, okay, you have these massive database monolithic applications running in your data center. And you want to start taking advantage of some of these newer technologies. And it's like, hey, we want to do microservices. What do we do? How do I break that large application down into smaller bits? But it's a database-bound application. So you get these interesting scenarios, right? So how do you take that monolithic data set and start breaking it up? How do you virtualize it? How do you get the data to the people who need it? So let's say I want to introduce, I do get it into production on AWS, but I'm still this big database-bound application. How do I start incorporating DynamoDB into that? And you're running both. Okay, what is the role for Delphix? So we're working on ideas like this that will help our customers make that transition to manage their data sets. Because remember, we also have the masking, right? And we also have these policy controls. So we can help the application developers go faster using these new data storage types while still giving the data operators confidence that, okay, you can use it. I don't have to worry about the data security as much because I understand that it's being controlled by this platform. So that's one of the directions we're looking at. But there's also a whole category of data set, and I forgot who was, I think you might have been talking about it, that really it's a different category of thing. Let's look at Kinesis, right, or Kafka. These things don't look like anything else out there. It's not even like a traditional message queue. They're these giant event buses. What do we do with that? So what is data operations in that model? So we're thinking about how does this, security and masking, absolutely, great. One of a huge developer challenge with these technologies is, how do I get data to test my algorithm? I'm pulling this event stream in, and I need realistic data so I can actually see if my routing technology works or my real-time data science scoring technology works. Doing that on fake data, I'm going to train my algorithms wrong. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, most people are going to train them wrong anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Fair point. So these are some of the areas that we're looking about. How do we evolve to be much more into the uses that our customers are using the cloud in? As Patrick was saying earlier about the data science and analytics, think about this scenario. So one of the challenges is, you have this great data lake. Well, how did you get and maybe it's not so great, maybe it's more of a swamp, but that's another story. How do you get your data sets that are in these monoliths into the database, into the data lake? Well, when I was working on those technologies, the thing that would frustrate me the most is we finally get it nicely organized, and then some application developer changes their schema and breaks my transformations. And I don't find out about that. I just get a production error. So now you look at a technology like what Delphix is building here is, hey, I can actually get that production schema, and I can get a little bit of advance notice that my algorithms aren't going to break. So I can actually look at the ETL developers' break-fix cycle and start to add value there in the development of their data pipelines as well. So that was pretty condensed. But I wanted to make sure, any questions? So my background is cloud, so fire cloud questions, and I'll do my best.
Yeah. You talked about those more modern data sources, Kinesis and those pieces, and testing those out. That I think we were touching on it earlier, and moving away from or adding those kind of services, complementing the traditional enterprise piece. How close are you to being able to enable that? Like it's a lofty.
Yeah,
goal.
it's a I'm on the engineering side, so I'm not allowed to give dates.
Well, we're talking. We know we need to do it, but we have no idea, and we've not started, or it's
So
5 years away.
We have solutions to these problems, and again, it depends on whether you're looking at managed solutions like Kinesis, which is hosted. You can't go underneath the hood. You have one set of controls we can offer, which are we're going to be much more API to API oriented, versus something like Kafka, where we can get in under the hood and do potentially different types of operations. So it depends on what type of component you're looking at and the degree that is managed. We believe, though, that I believe that one of the primary reasons companies are looking at Amazon is that, or Google or whomever the cloud provider is, they don't want to manage things themselves. That's the big advantage. So over time, they will have this, and Amazon helps by releasing a new product every day. They will have this pressure to adopt more and more of those technologies that are just pure APIs and not a provisioner of infrastructure that then you still have operational responsibility for. So more and more you'll see our policy controls interop and provide a lot of that glue and control, especially when you're looking at heterogeneous environments. If you're looking at a company that is 100% on Amazon, yeah, some of the stuff we do is interesting, but they're just going to use everything that's on Amazon. But most enterprises are not 100% and will never be 100% on Amazon, so they have to contend with this heterogeneous problem. Did that answer your question? Sort of?
Okay. Yeah.
I'll answer it a little more directly without giving dates. We're actively working on those kinds of solutions and setting the foundation for that.
What he said.
Yeah.
So, for example, if we look at something like Aurora, it's APIs only. We can start to do a lot of the operations today based on that. Now, we're not going to ingest it necessarily because the virtualization doesn't add value, but we can start to do all of the orchestration, especially when you realize that a developer, these are going to be more and more developer-controlled systems. Operators want to set up policies and then hand it over to developers so they can script against it. And so that's what we want to do. We really are going to work with these operators to set up these policies, and we're working on this now, so that they can have much more control, but give the freedom to the developer to use the data sources that they want.